Hey everybody, welcome back to the Insider Guys Industry Chats. Today I'm joined by Simon Emmett, CEO of IDP Connect. So Simon's role is multifaceted. He's leading the strategic direction and operational delivery of IDP Connect, the B2B division of IDP Education, who are the global leaders really in student placement, student and marketing and recruitment. And as a global organization with access and insights across 30 countries, IDP are well connected and placed really to look at the issues surrounding COVID-19 in multiple markets regarding international education. And a common question in our recent webinars has been about the role of agents and the response from agents as well about what is going to happen once this is over. And a recent study conducted by IDP Connect found that many international students with enrollment offers from universities remain determined to fulfill their global education goals despite the current travel restrictions. The majority of students surveyed are holding on to their aspirations to commence their studies on campus within months of the originally intended start date. Whether or not it's going to be possible or not, who knows? But let's unpack this today. Thank you so much for joining us today, Simon.
Hi, James. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity.
No worries. Well, Simon, can you tell us a bit more about the findings of this study?
Yeah, so the survey that we've just released this week, and we had out in the field in April. And what we looked to do, and this was a response from our partners, is to really drill into the intent and the motivations of applicant and offer holders. So what we looked to do is we looked at, and we had responses from just under 7,000 applicants, those intending to study in Australia, in New Zealand, in the UK, US, and Canada. And what we look to find out is their original motivations, their intent, and also the considerations that were driving their decisions, whether that's the questions they've got regarding commencement dates, perceptions on safety and welfare of international students, and also their views of online versus face-to-face delivery. And I think the key headline, which you may have seen, that we shared through partners this week, including Austrade, was that only 5% of the applicants and the offer holders are no longer expected to commence their studies. So there's real intent there. There's a lot of questions outstanding, of course, but that intent is there.
Wow, it's I guess yeah, it is a bit. It is surprising, but I guess it shows the resilience of international students as well, that they weren't going to let this global pandemic get in their way. How about Australia? I mean, what did the survey results tell you about what's happening here?
Yeah, so there's positive news for Australia. I mean, demand remains strong in terms of the original perceptions that students had of Australia. That remains largely intact. 80% overall didn't change their perceptions, and that was 78% for Australia. It actually had improved for New Zealand and Canada, and I think that's something to pull out. The response of Canada and New Zealand government and organisations to the pandemic, also to the safety of their citizens, was well received and has been noted. So that's something to look at. But in terms of the placement of Australia in relative position to the UK and US, they performed strongly. Now, one of the key points that we covered was that intent on timing of intakes, and clearly the UK, Canada certainly are looking at increasing their intake and their provision at the start of 2021. That's clear from the discussions that we've had. So competition for international students is certainly increasing.
Wow, that's amazing that they're going to compete directly on timings. That's an interesting bit of news. What I would like to talk about safety here. There are students that put their study plans on hold or changed their minds about international education. 29% said it was due to feeling unsafe to travel to Australia for study, comparing favorably with the UK, where 56% believe this to be the case. Do you think this messaging is coming from the media, the government, or is it just sort of word of mouth kind of thing?
Yeah, I think you're right to pull that out, and that was a key observation. Again, comparing Australia to the UK and the US. So that's certainly something that we noted. I guess we've talked about this a lot as a team and globally. The difference, I guess, is you look further back. I not long into working in the international sector, we had the SARS challenges, and at that point, the access to information and misinformation was very different. And what we've found in working with students in all of our regions is they want the trusted information. And I think the work that the Global Reputation Group is doing in Australia does stand out. I think the work of Austrade, the work of the destination groups, the work of the universities as well, with the announcements that we've had in recent weeks in terms of the support that is being offered, that really does stand out. And I don't know if you saw earlier in this week, the UK government announced that a similar group, an international working group, will be set up in higher education, probably on the same basis. But I think Australia has taken the lead there. I think the other thing to say, as well as that access to trusted and official information, is what we've worked with our teams is about giving students a voice as well. And students are looking for that trusted, that authentic, that honest opinion. And that's really what we've looked to do with our content teams. So takeovers, for example, of our social media channels by international students who are in country. I mean, it's something that we actually looked at going back to the bushfires and looking at what is really happening in Australia. So I think that mix of official guidance and also that authentic, that student voice, that's something really we're looking at lifting in our channels. I think just to pull out one other bit of data, and I think from a source market, China stood out in terms of some of the data, that 31% of students who weren't going to commence said it was because they maybe wouldn't feel welcome in the destination country. That's across all markets. And I think that is something that we and others are very aware of, and specific messaging with regards to that. Obviously, we saw the messaging from Michael Spence in the last week. I think it's really important that the messaging officially, but also from students, as I said, is very clear.
Geez. The whole China issue is I think it's just going to unfold in a way that, I don't know. It's going to so many things, people speculating on it. I'll move on. So, among those students who have indicated a change of plans, more than half reasoned they were uncertain of being able to leave their home country due to the current travel bans, highlighting the need for cross-border cooperation. And I mean, as a leading sort of global agent, I guess, what role do you think IDP should play or is playing in advocating for this sort of cooperation between, different countries?
Yeah, so on that, we see our role, an important role is providing access not just to the data, but the insights that we've got. So the quantitative data, the search behavior, the things like this, the survey, the dashboards that we're building for our partners. Also the link in, came up on a webinar we had this morning, the link into our regional teams. What are students saying on the ground? What are their concerns? What are their hopes? What are their aspirations? And being that link in to our partners, our client partners throughout the world, but also the relevant groups, as I said, in terms of the feeding into the task force in Australia. In the UK, we similarly, like we do in the other destination groups, markets, we have an advisory group that's chaired by Michael Arthur, who's the provost of UCL, University of UK International, sit on that group as well. So we really see our role as providing not just the data, but the insights, the analysis, the recommendations to then work with institutions, key stakeholders and government. So in regards to commencement, the concerns over how and when students will be able to travel, and I understand there's been some possible positive news in regards to that. I mean, what are the options there for students? And is the option of chartered flights, for example, something that quite soon that we can begin to talk to students about? Of course, knowing that it will be safe to do so, and the other arrival requirements that are in place as well. So as I said, we see our role very much as providing the data and insights to work then with key organisations and provide clarity for our students around the world, or potential students around the world.
Yeah, I think every institution now is trying to work out if they can deliver part of their course online, and then that student can then work out and then sort of arrive later. I was just speaking to some small institutions in Australia who are, who can't really do that, and so they've just they offer higher education, but they're too small to be able to partner up with another organisation overseas. So they really it's just sort of stopped for them. So it's interesting to see how this situation is playing out. I mean, I noted that 47% of students who preferred deferral said that they were particularly concerned about the teaching standards. I mean, that's fair enough. I mean, the online is not face-to-face, and if social distancing remains in place for some time, it's going to likely impact the way universities have to operate, perhaps with a mixture of online, some in face-to-face, and it'll change. I mean, do you think international students will expect that same standard of education, and can that even be provided?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. The survey showed that there were concerns, as you say, about that, but actually the primary concern was about the experience that they're looking for, and that's something that I think we all need to talk to. They are looking for international exposure, and I think that was a key driver between students looking to either defer or begin online, but with that certainty that they can move face to face. That was the primary concern, more so than the quality of the online education. So I think certainty there that we can provide in terms of the living and working conditions, but particularly I think for certain markets, certainty on post-study work eligibility. That's something that Canada, as we know, and New Zealand have stepped forward with, and I do expect that the UK government and I believe Australia will step forward quite soon in terms of clarity with regards to that. So there's different drivers there. I think in terms of the online experience, again, what does that look like for the different types of study? I think University of Oxford said yesterday that tutorials would be face to face, but other lectures perhaps would be online. Now that they're looking to commence still in the autumn term. There are questions, of course, from students in terms of fees. And what are the fees for if you begin online, if the course continues to stay online. We had about 180 Australian universities and colleges on a webinar this morning, and we asked the question in a poll in terms of their intent regarding fees. 49% said that they weren't intending to reduce their fees for online. And then as we look through that, 13% we're looking at up to 10% reduction, 11%, 11 to 20% fee reduction, 7% on 21 to 30, and then 21% to be confirmed. So still a large amount that are to be confirmed. And I think that's what students are looking for, is that clarity. I think there's been some institutions that we've noted that have said, yes, there will be lower fees for beginning online. I don't think that will be common, certainly in the UK. But that will be important. So yeah, I guess my key comment would be, what is the online delivery? Which components are fully online? Obviously, if you're still in your home country, it'll be all of it. But giving certainty on when face-to-face will commence. So
Yeah.
we saw for undergraduate students, or prospective undergraduate students, they are more prepared to commence online with confidence that it will move to face-to-face, and obviously with a longer duration, of course. I guess that's to be expected.
Yeah, we had Rob Lawrence on a webinar last week, who was talking about the way in which universities and colleges need to promote the online experience, and really just sort of sell it up. But then we've been talking to students over the past few months who are, they're so angry that their institutions haven't lowered their fees, and they got the study component, but they didn't get the whole Australian experience. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. But universities, there's a huge amount of fixed costs as well. They can't just, it's not like they just remove their cost structure because all of a sudden they're delivering online. So, I guess I'll focus on that, what you said about certainty, because yeah, I mean, we in that survey as well, it said that there was that students would prefer to delay until 2021 as opposed to commencing their courses online, particularly at the postgraduate level. I guess this makes it difficult for those institutions who are relying on a September intake or that sort of thing. Are you seeing a shift towards, it's 2021 now, we're just focusing on that period of time? Is that what we're seeing?
I think it's different by different destination markets. I think Canada have been fairly clear across the board that they're looking where they can at an online start as required and move face to face. Whereas in the US, what we're seeing is still high intent for face to face from the fall. I guess with the associated income that comes from accommodation and so on, it's not just tuition fees. I think from a student's perspective, what's clear is that they want to commence when it's safe.
Yeah.
And different destination markets are in different positions. Clearly, as I sit in the UK, it's very different from New Zealand and from Australia, and students are seeing that. They're noting that in the survey. So students want to commence when it's safe, and I think the same for the sector. It's student and it's safety first. And I was chatting to a vice chancellor in the UK. Is one concern is students starting, and then if there is a second spike as well. So there's lots of different considerations. I think safety first is what we're seeing. Of course, there's the business drivers that there are some institutions in the UK. There's now a cap on domestic student placement and enrolment. It's not been in place for a number of years. And so there is that hope that September the students will commence, whether it's online in the first instance. There are some Russell Group universities that I know are looking at postgrad taught start dates in January, where there's more certainty. And that, as I said, will then bring some Russell Group universities in line with G of 8 and other Australian universities. I think that's something to watch.
Wow.
But I think the key message is I think students are clearly and obviously looking at the safety first, and also what support will they be provided when they're in country.
It's funny, I think people think of universities as, quite established, very established structures that are incapable of moving quickly. But I guess when some of this thing sort of happens, they are forced into action. They're changing study dates here and there. It's incredible to see the innovation. I hope it sort of continues on. I'm curious to hear about the role of agents. I mean, obviously IDP is a huge agent. How do you view the agent's role in marketing a destination in the next stage of this pandemic? I guess, as students grapple to understand if there's limitations, if there's travel restrictions, where can you go, when can you go? Are they going to do that online, or how do you see the relevance of IDP or an agent?
So our approach remains the same. It's student first, and it's providing them with the information that helps them make the right choice, whether that's drivers of the course, whether it's the individual university, or whether it's a destination. And clearly for Canada, and you see from the survey, Canada and New Zealand, there's higher intent on the destination. That is a driver, whereas course and university are stronger drivers for other destinations. It doesn't change what we do and what our teams and our counsellors and our technology does around the world. Clearly, how we do it has changed very, very quickly. The move to virtual counselling, the virtual events, and so on. And really, what students are looking for is that support. They want clarity, and they want information as quickly as possible. We do work with destination groups to promote destinations, and we want to make sure that we're getting the messages out on behalf of Australia and New Zealand and other destinations. But I think that the key point is that it's got to be student first. We don't see from the survey, high intent on shifting destinations at this point. However, if certain destinations open up before others, I think that may change. So I think we may see potentially students may shift to between destinations, and that's something that clearly we want to provide that information to students as quickly and efficiently as possible. And we can do that in ways that we couldn't do before. We've now got a global platform in place, email remarketing and contact and text updates and social media channels. It's a lot easier to do that. Now we've got that platform in place that we didn't have just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I think this will be such an interesting time just after COVID finishes. Well, hopefully it finishes, where I think the role of the big agents will will really provide that extra level of value, because you can send students all around the world into multiple markets. You've got the support to help them make better decisions. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting one for the agent world. I'll move on here to a bit more of an overall response, because I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. In terms of sort of, do you think we're going to see the same levels of global student movement once COVID has passed, or do you think we're going to have to rethink the international education model?
It's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty,
Mm.
but what we're doing is we're looking at the data very closely. We're looking at the different data sets. So this survey was focused on applicant and offer holders. They're the students that were and are almost ready to go, and there is still a very, very high intent there, despite the challenges in country and travel and so on. So there's a high intent. But then as we look further up the research journey, the applicants, new applicants, there's real intent there. I mean, to give you an idea of, in India, for example, we've just hosted a set of virtual events. Over 20,000 students in April attended those, and the number of applicants from that is very, very strong. And there's some feedback from some of the teams is that some students in some markets are intent on being at the front of the queue to get the application in, and then when the intakes and the capacity on certain intakes are clear, that they feel that they'll be at the front of the queue. So we're seeing strong demand at applicant stage, but also then further up the research journey, again, those researching on the websites that are further out, let's say they're 12, 18 months out, that intent has bounced back in recent weeks. And clearly there's there's the seasonal changes, but that intent has come back. So structurally, what we're seeing from the data would indicate yes. They're not impulse purchases. These are dreams that have been the dreams of students and their parents for many, many years, and that intent we're seeing is still there. Now that, of course, could change over time, but at this point it is certainly indicating a bounce back.
That's fascinating. I didn't really think about that in terms of, you would have thought in a pandemic, you sort of stay close to home. You really just want to look, but really I guess the flip side of that is you want to get out. you want to go somewhere safer and with a better future, go really start building your career, building your life. Wow, I didn't really think about that. That's really cool. It's similar to what Rob Lawrence was saying as well, that these decisions are huge, multi-year decisions. They're not just going to change it because of one thing. It's, yeah, interesting. All right. Well, I mean, you're based in the UK. Obviously, in every country is offering different levels of support to international students. There's been a bit of criticism from some people within Australia around, or pretty widespread criticism of the way international students are being supported in Australia, with the wage subsidy not being extended. You can't access JobSeeker, JobKeeper, that sorts of things, where you can in Canada and UK, I believe, to an extent, and also New Zealand. How are you feeling that students are being responded to in the UK from the institutions and government as well?
So I guess starting with Australia. So when I was over in January, we're in a meeting with our advisory groups, and as the news started, even that day, some of the news started to come through regarding the travel bans. I was just incredibly impressed by how quickly the teams worked to move. And just before I left, actually, I had a meeting with Monash and caught up with them. My message when I came back to the UK was the speed of innovation and contact and support with students was very impressive. And I do think that my message to our UK advisory group was that it's been slower in the UK, and maybe that was because of the pressure of the big intake for Australia, and there's more time for the UK. We then started to see a shift. The focus in the UK was clearly on existing students and looking at supporting them, looking at preparing for the terms, the final term, for exams, for graduations, and so on. That has been a challenge, and clearly it's a challenge when university's teams, or everyone's working from home.
Mm.
You know, in the UK, there's the schools are closed at the moment. Everyone is working from home with lots of different challenges. So that the focus has been on existing students, increasingly looking at how we support applicants and answer their questions. The pivot to look at virtual events with a great engagement from universities across the world in terms of joining our events and connecting in with students. I joined one that was held virtually for Chennai. It's a really great engagement from the teams and answering the questions. There's, you know, we've seen US and Canadian colleagues wake up very, very early to connect in with source markets as well. So I think there's been really good support. Has there been enough support from government in the view of UK institutions? I think it's a challenge. I think, you know, every sector is challenged, and I do think the governments will look to support where they can from a policy perspective. Financially, it's clearly a challenge, and I don't think universities are necessarily at the front of the queue in financially, but in terms of support, whether it's commitment, as I said, to post-study work, I think we'll see more of that in the coming weeks.
No, time will tell. I've got a question. It's sort of I hope not too much time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually funny. You know, there is a lot of support there for students, and something I've seen this week is that there is support coming from, you know, charities, local government, state government, federal government, institutions, accommodation providers, and it's all fantastic. On the front of it, it's great, but for the students, it's a minefield to try and navigate where there's support, how to actually access it. So it's one thing to have the support; it's another thing to actually help students know that it's there. And, you know, for example, the Red Cross just received like $300 million from the Australian government, and international students are entitled to it, but they don't know that. Like, a lot of international students associate the Red Cross with, you know, foreign aid or dealing with the homeless people. Yeah, so it's a huge communication problem, and it's just they're up against it, you know. So I'd love to sort of hear a little bit now. I'll just combine a couple of questions, because there's one. I mean, if we look at what IDP is up to right now, I mean, you're a global agent business with offices in multiple countries. Those offices are most likely closed. You've got testing centers across the world, most likely closed. So I'm curious to see, what is your focus right now? And, you know, what are you looking at in terms of where do you want to spend your time and effort?
Yeah, so I got back from Australia via Singapore at the start of, just the very end of January. We moved to daily calls from that, so the pretty early 6 a.m. calls in the UK to team calls, and that's where we've got everyone together globally, and on our teams, our global leadership team and other members of that group. The number one priority, and we kicked off every call, was the safety of our team. And so at that point, obviously, the Steel for China kicked off, looked at the safety and support for the team. And that was incredible to see how everyone came together. There was masks going across from India to China, face masks at that point. As that develops, we look at other, not just obviously the physical safety, but the mental well-being of our teams all working remotely. And that pivot to do that. And so, clearly, how the teams come together to celebrate some of the achievements, but also socially. There's a quiz that's ongoing. There's a global quiz that's going. I've got to say the Australian team are winning at the moment. Obviously, fiercely competitive. But our number one focus has been on our teams. Then, as we look at students and our clients, from a student's perspective, is how we're connecting in with them, and we do benefit from our technology and some of the contact that we can push out very quickly through the different channels, through email, through text messages, through social, and so on. So, as you say, given that clarity, there's lots of information out there, and that connection in, lots of calls that have gone from our counsellors into students, not just applicant and offer holders, but prospective students as well. From a client perspective, our focus has been, I mean, there's lots of webinars
Yeah.
and support out there. So what we've tried to focus is on that data and insights. As I said, we had one this morning, about 180 Australian universities, to find out not just, as I said, the data, but the insights and the recommendations that we can give to them and to senior leaders. So that has been something that has been well received, and we'll look to do and host some of those with partners, sector partners, and as I said, also the connection in with our regional teams. So we had a webinar a couple of weeks ago, which was hosted with our onshore teams, which also covered the support that we're offering to students in Australia. So that's been our focus. In terms of initiatives, we have pivoted. We've got a digital campus in Chennai that opened late last year. We have reprioritized some of the programs. Ask IDP, which is a big initiative focused on answering the questions through social and through our app, has been prioritized. Our virtual event technology has been prioritized as well. So there's been a pretty quick pivot and focus on the digital innovation and how we can keep connected in to our students.
With that in mind, the digital pivot will continue, and thank you very much for your time today, Simon.
Thanks, James.
Yeah.